Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Speak Smart podcast. So today we're doing a deep dive into a popular English learning podcast. We're really going to try to extract the most useful tips and tricks, especially when it comes to invitations and responses, just to help our listeners navigate the sometimes tricky waters of social interaction in English.
It's funny, we often focus so much on grammar and vocabulary, but it's really about using those tools, in real life situations.
Exactly. So let's just start with the basics. What makes for a solid invitation in English?
So it's kind of like a little miniature announcement. You need the event itself, and then the when, so the day and time, and then probably the most important part, the will you be there? So like a clear question, inviting the person to join.
That makes sense. But the way we phrase that question probably changes a lot, depending on who we're inviting, what the occasion is, right?
Absolutely. Tone and formality are so important.
Yeah.
You wouldn't invite your boss to a meeting the same way you would invite your best friend.
Definitely not. So how do we find that balance and make sure our invitations are appropriate?
I think it comes down to context. So for example, a casual get-together like a birthday party, you could just say something simple like, hey, are you free to celebrate on Saturday? But for a more formal event like a business dinner, you might want to say something like, we'd be honored if you could join us for dinner on Friday evening.
So choosing the right level of formality is important. But what about the different ways we can extend these invitations? Does it matter if it's a phone call or a text or an email or even face-to-face?
That's a great question. Each medium has its own little nuances. Like a face-to-face invitation has that personal touch. A phone call adds that immediacy. And texts and emails are just convenient.
So if I'm inviting a friend for coffee, could I just send a text that says, hey, want to grab coffee Thursday afternoon?
Yeah, definitely. But for a formal event, a well-structured email with all the details is better. It's interesting though. More and more people are using messaging apps for invitations these days, so it's really important to be able to write clear and concise invitations in that format.
Now let's talk about responding to invitations. What are some golden rules there?
Well, no matter if you can attend or not, a prompt and polite response is key. Just a simple, thank you for the invitation, can go a long way.
Right, it's basic etiquette.
Exactly. And if you can attend, you can show you're excited about the event. You could say something like, that sounds fantastic. I'd love to come.
Now, what if you're not sure yet? Could you say something like, I'll check my schedule and let you know?
Of course. Just make sure you follow up soon. And give them a definite answer by a specific date. So the host can finalize their plans. If you can't make it, but you still want to connect, suggesting another time to meet is a good idea.
That's a helpful tip. But let's face it, things aren't always straightforward. So how about those special situations, like declining politely? Or changing plans? Or what about those last-minute invitations? How do we handle all of those gracefully?
Well, those are the moments when your English communication skills really matter. Yeah, declining politely, it's a real balancing act. You want to be honest, but also respectful. So, you want to thank them for the invite, but also give a reason why you can't make it.
Right, so instead of just saying no, what are some polite ways to decline?
Well, let's say you're invited to a party, but you already have plans. You could say something like, thank you so much for the invitation, but I already have plans that day. I hope you have a great time.
That sounds good. What about if work is the reason you can't go?
Then you might say, thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, I have a prior work commitment that day. I wish I could be there.
Short and sweet. Now, I've heard that in some cultures, it's considered rude to give a direct no. How do we navigate those situations?
That's a great point. In some cultures, especially in parts of Asia, a direct no can sound very abrupt. So people tend to use more indirect language to decline politely.
So instead of saying, I can't come, you might say, I'll try my best, or I'll see if I can make it.
Exactly. Those phrases give you a way to decline without actually saying no. It's amazing how language and culture are so connected.
It really is. Now let's say you've accepted an invitation, but then something comes up and you need to change your plans.
Oh, the dreaded plan change. It happens to all of us. But the key is to communicate clearly and get as much notice as possible.
So if something unexpected comes up and I need to reschedule, what should I do?
Well, the first thing is to let the host know as soon as possible. Don't wait until the last minute. A simple message like, hi, something came up on my end and I need to reschedule. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience would be a good start.
And I imagine offering some alternative dates or times would be helpful too.
Absolutely. It shows that you're flexible and you're really trying to make it work.
Now, what about those last-minute invitations? They can be fun, but also a bit stressful if you're busy.
That's true. But again, the most important thing is to respond promptly and honestly. If you're free and you want to go, you could just say, "Thanks for the invite. I'm free and would love to come." But if you're not available, be upfront and say, "Thanks for thinking of me, but I already have plans."
And what if you need some time to figure things out? Is it okay to say, "Let me check my schedule and I'll get back to you"?
Of course. Just make sure you follow up with a definite answer as soon as you can.
Now let's talk about cultural differences. I know we've mentioned this a few times already, but it's so important to be aware of these differences when it comes to invitations and responses.
It really is. Different cultures have different norms and expectations around formality, level of detail, and even how they prefer to communicate.
So it's not just about speaking English fluently, it's also about understanding the cultural context.
Exactly. For instance, in many Western cultures, it's common to send formal written invitations with all the details like the date, time, location, dress code. But in some Asian cultures, verbal invitations during casual conversations are more typical.
That's interesting. I can see how that could lead to misunderstandings if you're not aware of the differences.
Yeah, definitely. Another big difference is how people respond to invitations. In some cultures, a direct yes or no is expected, but in others, people might give more indirect responses to avoid seeming rude.
So for example,
In some Asian cultures, people might say, "I'll try my best," or "I'll see if I can make it," even if they're not sure they can attend. It's a way of being polite and showing consideration without giving a firm answer right away.
so you really have to read between the lines sometimes.
Exactly. It's all about being sensitive to cultural differences and adapting your communication style.
Now let's talk about gift giving. When is it appropriate to bring a gift when you're invited to something? And what kind of gift is appropriate?
That's a good question. Gift-giving etiquette can vary a lot from culture to culture. In some cultures, like many Asian countries, it's essential to bring a gift when you visit someone's home or attend a special event. It's a sign of respect and good manners.
So what kind of gift would be good in those situations?
It really depends on the culture and the occasion. But generally speaking, small tokens of appreciation like fruit, sweets, or flowers are always appreciated.
And in some Western cultures, like the US or Canada, it's common to bring a bottle of wine or dessert to a dinner party.
Right. Those are seen as a way of thanking the host for their hospitality. The important thing is to do a little research and be mindful of the customs in the culture you're interacting with.
And if you're not sure, just ask. A simple question like, "Is there anything I should bring?" can help you avoid any awkwardness.
Absolutely. Now let's switch gears and talk about some common mistakes that people make with invitations. You know those little slip-ups that we all make from time to time?
We all make mistakes. It's part of being human.
Yeah.
But it's how we handle those mistakes that really matters.
Exactly. One of the most common mistakes is forgetting to include important details in an invitation, like the time or location or dress code. Those little things can make a big difference.
It's easy to overlook those details, especially when you're in a hurry.
It is, so it's always a good idea to double-check your invitations before you send them out. And if you do realize you've missed something, just send a quick follow-up message.
Right, that shows you're on top of things. Now, I know I've been guilty of this myself, but sometimes I delay responding to invitations, especially when I'm busy or I'm not sure if I can make it.
We've all done that, but even a quick message saying you've received the invitation and you'll get back to them soon is helpful. It lets the host know you haven't forgotten about them.
And it saves them from having to send a reminder.
Exactly. And speaking of responses, let's talk about those vague ones like maybe or I'll try. They might seem harmless, but they can really make things difficult for the host.
Because they don't know if they should count you in or not. It's better to be as clear as possible.
Absolutely. If you need more time, just say so and give them a date when you'll be able to confirm.
Now, here's another one I'm guilty of. Overcommitting. Saying yes to everything and then feeling stressed and overwhelmed.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's easy to do, especially when you want to practice your English and be social, but it's important to be realistic about your time and energy.
Yeah, you can't do everything.
Right. So before you say yes to every invitation, think about your schedule and how much energy you have. It's okay to decline if you need to.
It's all about setting boundaries. Now let's talk about one of the most awkward social situations. Accidentally double booking yourself.
Oh no, the double booking nightmare. But it happens. What matters is how you handle it.
So how do we fix it? How do we get out of that situation gracefully?
Well, the first thing is to be honest and act quickly. As soon as you realize you've double booked, contact both hosts. Explain what happened, apologize, and see if you can reschedule one of the events.
And if you can't reschedule,
Then you have to choose which one to go to and politely let the other host know. Again, a sincere apology and maybe an offer to make it up to them can help smooth things over.
Right. It shows you respect their time and that you understand it's not a great situation for anyone. Now, before we wrap up, I want to go back to cultural differences. We've talked about it throughout this episode, but it's so important to be culturally aware when you're interacting with others.
I completely agree. It's not just about avoiding embarrassing mistakes. It's about showing respect for other cultures and trying to understand them. Different cultures have different ways of doing things, and that's something to appreciate.
So what are some tips for navigating those cultural nuances, especially with invitations and responses?
Well, first, do your research. If you're going to be interacting with people from a different culture, take some time to learn about their customs and etiquette around invitations, responses, gift giving. There are lots of resources online and in libraries.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. Just say something like, is there anything I should know about customs or etiquette that can really help you avoid awkward situations?
It shows that you're willing to learn. And if you do make a mistake, don't worry, everyone does. Just acknowledge it, apologize if you need to, and be open to learning from it.
It's all about being humble, curious, and open-minded.
Exactly. Remember, learning English is an ongoing journey, and part of that journey is learning about different cultures and how to communicate effectively with people from all over the world. It makes us better communicators and helps us connect with people.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into invitations and responses in English. We've covered a lot today, from how to write a good invitation to how to deal with those tricky cultural differences.
We've looked at different ways to communicate. We talked about common mistakes and how to handle them, and we emphasized how important it is to be culturally sensitive and adaptable.
We hope you found this deep dive useful and helpful as you continue on your English learning journey.
Remember, clear communication, respect, and cultural awareness are the keys to making meaningful connections.
Thank you for listening to the Speak Smart podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, happy speaking.
Happy speaking.